We will go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you to the opening session on Thursday. This is a leadership conference. It's the first annual, so I hope that you've had an opportunity to attend a number of sessions over the last few days. My name is Penny Cox, and I'm the Director of the Housing Project Implementation for the campus. I've been at UK 43 years, so I've seen a lot of change and hopefully have built a lot of relationships over my career at UK. But what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the format for this program. It is a panel, and I have a few questions that I will ask myself, and then the way it works is we get audience questions, audience participation, because whatever's the burning question on your mind about how to build those relationships and the power that you get from having great relationships, we have an expert panel here that can answer. This program is being live streamed, so we will take questions via tweet and all sorts of other social media, and I think some questions have actually come in as well. So I'm going to introduce our panel. First is Victor Hazard. He is our interim vice president for student affairs, and his real job is dean of students and all sorts of other careers throughout the institution. So I've had the pleasure of working with Victor a number of years. Next is Mary Vosevich. She is our Vice President for Facilities. She's been at UK about a year and a half.
13 months and 27
days. 13. She's making a significant impact. Comes into a $1.8 billion transformation of the campus and is leading the way for a lot of other initiatives for modernization, which we hope to get approval for shortly. Next is Sue Roberts. She is a faculty member, professor, associate dean, many titles in the College of Arts and Sciences, and her profession study is geography, so we've had a little bit of chance to chat about some of our mutual friends this morning. Next is Terry Allen. He's our interim vice president for, I have to get this right, Terry, because I never get institutional equity, vice president for institutional equity. Terry and I started at UK about the same time, and we used to eat lunch together on the main front lawn, sitting on the bench. So we go back a long ways.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Next is Austin Mullen. Austin is our president of student government. He also sits on the board of trustees as the student representative to the board and has a number of initiatives for students, and I think can really speak to the power of relationships and networking from the student perspective. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for agreeing to share your pearls of wisdom with the audience. And I'll go ahead and ask the first question. How has building relationships been a factor in your leadership experience? And we'll just start and go down the line. Victor?
Oh, you're just going to start with me, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, lucky me. Good morning, everyone. I beg to differ with Penny with regards to experts. There are definitely I see 4 experts here, but I may be the rookie with regards to relationships. Simply from my perspective, I don't really give long, drawn-out answers, so you glean what you can from my comments, so you better listen up tight, okay? I believe relationships are the cornerstones to any success or failures that we have in our work experience, whatever that work experience may be. If you don't build that cornerstone relationships well the first time, It's tough to back up and repair, so that somehow I must be able to connect with my audiences, whether that be faculty, staff, students. That is so important to me, that I do it right the first time. And arguably, it becomes an ongoing relationship, hopefully, that I have with that individual. And so to me, it is the cornerstone to obviously success and failure in my chosen career.
Well, for me, I think everything that I do is about relationships. And I think everything that you do is about relationships also. And it's not just work relationships, it's work relationships in your professional lives, your personal lives, be it Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, your church life, your neighborhoods, anything, that we're involved in. And I think when you think about those relationships, you have to start first with what your personal values are. And so I always have to go back to what my personal values are, and I have to also remind myself that what my personal values are aren't necessarily what your personal values are. But if I start with where I'm coming from and I respect other people for who they are, that's a foundation of building those relationships. Believe me, working in facilities for 30 years, you can't do it without building relationships. And those relationships go from the lowest graded levels in our organization to the highest graded levels in our organization. I'm talking university-wide here. And so, much like Victor said, you have to know who your audience is too. When I am giving a presentation to the president, it's going to be different than my relationship that I'm having with one of my staff members. It's very different. And so you have to nurture those relationships. And let me tell you, those are the things that when you set your goal for what you want to do in your daily life or in your careers, those are the relationships that will foster your ability to get to whatever it is that your goal is. So my father used to always write letters. He was an incredible letter writer. And being the youngest and the one that started his gray hair development, I would walk around with those letters sometimes in my back pocket for a while before I'd even read them, because sometimes they were reminding me of things that I could improve upon, maybe, and sometimes they were, of a different nature. But he signed every one of his letters with the initials TTOSBT, which was a Shakespeare quote of "To thine own self be true." And so I always remind myself of that in any relationship that I'm having with someone, that I have to be true to myself, but I have to respect the fact that those folks also have the same thing, that they need to be true to themselves as well. And sometimes we meet in the middle, sometimes we have disagreements, but we really have to foster that. I never would have imagined that I would be sitting here talking to folks at the University of Kentucky in the position that I'm in. But it was those relationships that I had along my journey that got me here. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Sue?
Yeah, good morning. I'm honored and a little bit perplexed about being on this panel, but I'm happy to be here and share what I can. It's interesting, Mary, you talked about your dad. So I grew up with the oldest of 3 kids, 2 younger brothers, and then I ended up with 3 more younger brothers, stepbrothers. So I was the oldest of 6, the only girl, and by far the smallest, which meant that the only way I could get anything done was to think of a different strategy than strength. Because if it came down physical strength, I was going to lose every time. And that was reinforced on multiple occasions. So I decided I had to have some kind of different way of prevailing. So I started to just think, how do you connect? How do you use your brain rather than your muscles in this case? And I think that it wasn't really that deliberate, I don't think, at the time. It was more of a survival strategy. But I think looking back on it, it did help me figure out how to get people to see your perspective and to move in a direction that you, because I was the oldest after all, often in charge and supposedly responsible for them, to get them to do what I thought they should be doing, you know. And I think that's a lesson that I've taken on through life is it's no good trying to force people to do things. It's no good trying to come in with your own agenda and expect everybody to sign up just because why. But it's much more effective to try and connect with who they are, the kind of things that are on their mind, and try and create something that you can do together. And I guess when I was asked, or looked at this question when it was sent, I was wondering about, it seems very instrumental, you know, do you build relationships very kind of deliberately to advance your own career? And I thought, well, no, I've never really done that exactly. But then when I thought about it, every morning and every night, what am I thinking about? It's about people. It's about how can I make a better connection with that person? How do I cope with this event in this person's life that's affecting how they're working and how I'm able to help them? And so it's actually, I have to agree with Victor and Mary that it is kind of everything. It's actually the most, it's the thing that I think about the most is how to build and nurture, which I think was a word you used also, nurture relationships in such a way that it ends up being positive and ends up being good for the work that we have to get done as a team.
Terry?
Well, I started with a number of comments, but as my distinguished colleagues have spoken, I've been checking them off the list over here. And it's amazing how our thinking is so very similar. You know, relationships, building relationships, it's a skill. It's a skill. It doesn't just happen. It's a skill the same as the other skills that you find in the workplace that are critical for success. And it's a skill that you must practice, and it's one in which you must learn and then be consistent. And that's my thinking as I sat here. I use the analogy in many of the issues I've dealt with in the past having to do with building a house. And you build a house and the garage door doesn't go up and down, the windows don't work properly, and the door sticks, and the plumbing rattles, and so forth and so on. And you have folks to come and repair all of these problems that you're having, and those aren't really the problems. The problem is that you built it on the incorrect foundation. So you must start with the foundation. You start with establishing relationships with individuals, and then you build on that is what you tend to do. You treat everyone every day the same, and you be the same. Inconsistency is one of the worst problems I think you'll ever face, and that is I don't know what to expect of you from one day to the next. And so you treat everyone the same, you be the same, you associate not just formally, but informally. There are times that we're placed in groups, we're placed on committees, we're placed in the workplace with individuals in which we have no choice. Yet on the other hand, informal associations quite often provide that. I really like those face-to-face associations as opposed to all the multiple ways now that we have found to relate to other people that are so impersonal. So I think that what you want to do, once again, is you want to be yourself, but you want to be consistent, and you want to understand that without the relationships with other people, there's very little that you can do yourself.
Good morning. I'm very thankful to be here today. Penny said this, these 5 people have wisdom. I think the wisdom is all this way, not right here. But when I heard this question, I immediately thought about what I've believed since my senior year of high school, and it's that you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. So thankfully, when I got to the University of Kentucky, I was able to get involved in various organizations and various places throughout campus where I was able to be surrounded by amazing students, and especially juniors and seniors, so students that were 2-3 years older than me, and they were crucial in my transition into freshman year, my transition into sophomore year, and as they've moved on in their careers, thankfully, I've been able to kind of mold myself into the leaders that they were. So I'm very grateful for that. So definitely surrounding yourself with those that will propel you to greater heights as compared to hold you back or make you go down. And then also, something else that's been crucial relationship-wise is just mentorship. Like I said, juniors and seniors and most freshmen. Then also, beyond that, having faculty and staff in my time at the university that I can talk to about anything has been crucial in my advancement as a human, and I'm very grateful for that. And on top of that, just about in the last 6 or 7 months, honestly, one of the people that I've molded myself after and I would consider a mentor is actually a student who is a grade below me. So it's in no way age, but it's just how they hold themselves and how I've seen him interact with people and be selfless in all that he does. So definitely not always just age when you're speaking of mentorship, but having someone that you can go to talk about anything, and then also use as a guide in all that you do.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have a follow-up question that you'd like to ask the group on this one? Yes.
I just want to follow on with Austin's point about mentorship. Do you feel like, for parents, do you feel like UK has a culture that supports and promotes mentorship across campus, not just in each individual business unit?
From a student perspective, I would say yes. I think that I have been very grateful in my college, Gagnon College of Business and Economics, to have faculty, especially freshman and sophomore year when I didn't have any real connection with staff to help propel me and connect me with people throughout the university that I can speak to about various things. So from a student perspective, I would say yes, but
Let me give you a perspective as a newbie. From what I've seen, I do believe there is a culture of that here. A lot of folks were so helpful to me when I came here, and the folks that work for me and folks that I work for can be your mentors. I have a young mentee out in Arizona right now, and every time I'm talking with her, I'm like, I'm learning more from her, I think, sometimes than what she's learning from me. So, I think that's also really important to keep in mind when you talk about mentoring. But, Maya Angelou talked about lifting as you climb also, and the very act of lifting will lift you as well. So I think that's about mentorship also. And so as you're climbing the ladder, don't knock the ladder off so people behind you can't climb as well. You've got to really reach out to that. But I see it here. I obviously can't speak, from other than my 13 months and 27 days, but I do see that. And one of the things that struck me being here at the university is there is a culture of abundance here. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about how people help each other, how people engage with each other, how they want to be helpful. I mean, just really want to be helpful. And that culture of abundance really, really is very supportive of relationships that we have.
I want to clarify, I was not insinuating that.
No, yeah.
I
No.
just wanted to know from your perspective if you felt like it crossed all boundaries.
I wanted to add just a little bit related to what I think the student experience. Austin spoke to that, I think, a little bit, but I think one area that we're going to have to focus on, and I'm thinking of student affairs in particular, is as we look at student success and retention, the idea of a way to chop up this rather large, intimidating campus for students, it has to be broken down, and I think part of that breaking down comes in the resident life experience and comes in the living learning programs, but I think it also comes with faculty and staff. And can we, and I'm just thinking here out loud, can we carve out an hour of our day, whatever that might be, in the course of a week, and I'm talking about futuristically, to target, if we will, the opportunity to reach out to a student who you might be connected with, who you might have just been introduced to. This idea of a connection with an individual on this campus. I think will go a long, long way. The idea that someone is interested in me enough to be invested in me, to take time out of their day, and it could be as innocent as a lunch, it could be just as innocent as really just sitting, finding a time that's convenient for the individual and yourself, to sit down to get to know one another. There tends to be, I think, with administrators in particular, when you get to my level and those at the table, that there's a distance. Well, they don't have time for me. So what would it mean if the interim vice president for student affairs got the phone number of one or two students and indeed just tried to connect with them? And I think that's something that I'm going to be stressing, obviously, with our staff going forward, is that you don't know what difference that may make in a student's life. We talk about retention, and there's a pool of students who become at risk, and we're able to readily identify those individuals. What if, whatever number that is, let's say it's in 1,000, let's say that there are 500 faculty, staff, and students take on 2 of those, and if we can identify them. To me, and it's not rocket science, but my sense is, as I've worked with students my entire career, that would be a major impact in their lives, especially the larger you are, how more important it is for us to make that personal touch, because everything else, obviously with the technologies and everything else that's out there, I would call those somewhat artificial touches. The idea of we are people who are engaged in relationships, who are about relationships, and I think that would go a long way, at least with our students, so we'll see how that evolves.
I was very fortunate to have studied 10 years under one of the brightest individuals I've ever encountered in my life. And I will tell you who her name was Nancy Ray. And I learned so much from this individual that I at times wondered why I was involved in the different issues and the different experiences that she placed me in the center of. And then the day when she left and retired, she looked at me and she said, "And now you're ready." And that, I'll never forget that. And it means so much to me. As I think of the institution as a whole, and having to do with this issue of mentorship, I think that if you look at the entire institution, if you speak with individuals in each category of employment, you will see that there's inconsistency, is what you will see. You will see some that have wonderful experiences here. You will see others that really question if the support is available and is provided that perhaps should be. I co-chaired the Women's Leadership and Career Development Task Force, which there are members that are present here in the audience, and I heard the concerns expressed by faculty in that. So once again, I think that mentorship, there are formal programs, there are informal. I'm not sure which is more effective, but what I do know is that it can be of tremendous value if it's put in place and if it is done right.
Yeah, I'll just add that in my experience, when I first came to the University of Kentucky, which was a long time ago, it was 20-some years ago, there was a kind of a formal mentorship program, and I was assigned a senior professor, I think he was in physics, to be my mentor. And we met once, and it was very awkward, and he didn't really know what to do with me, and I really didn't know what to say to him, and it kind of just, we never met again, except in the elevator. It was awkward for years, but anyway. So that, it was kind of like a little mentoring program. It didn't really work, but I had wonderful mentors. It was informal. They were just folks in my department who did exactly what Victor's saying, just took a little bit of time to connect with me. And they shared highs and lows, and I felt that they were very trustworthy people with whom I could share my troubles and my successes, and that made a huge difference, huge. So, yeah, I don't know how widespread that experience is, but it was kind of a formal experience that didn't really work, but informal experience that was crucial.
Okay. Yes.
Could you speak a bit to the challenges associated with all the social media and the less and less personal contact that we have in terms of building relationships?
Well, I guess I'm the one that brought it up. I guess so, but I will be brief. And again, I think that, technology has offered some wonderful opportunities. It's also brought some tremendous challenges. I work in a building where there are various, obviously various departments, various people. I see people communicate with each other perhaps down the hall or even at times in the office next door via email as opposed to getting up to walk around there and say good morning. You know, and we get very quickly to the work at hand and we sometimes forget the personal piece. So that's my reference. That's my point of reference. And I've seen this in many, many of the issues that I've dealt with over the years that I have been here, and it seems to be escalating. It seems to be, and especially given the more technology, the more technical advancements, the more we're able to do these. Now, there are times when it is essential. There are times when you have no choice. And that's the world we live in. But at the same time, there are others in which you can actually have those face-to-face conversations. The trainings we've provided over the years, what's been most effective is the in-person training. And someone is standing there and you can talk to and you can ask questions as opposed to other forms of training. But it's impossible to do when you're trying to train 40, 50,000 people. It just simply does not work. So once again, I think that that's the direction we're moving, but we must be very cautious as we move in that direction not to lose something that's of extreme value to us, and that's our culture of helping each other.
I don't think there's any doubt that technologies have their place, and I'm a firm believer in connecting person to person, and in any opportunity that I have, I try to do that because I think that's where I'm at my best. If I send you an email, there are inferences and words that are used in those email communications that you can think mean a certain thing based on our conversation or the topic at hand, and I could mean something totally different. It's tough to follow up with email messages other than with another email message or with Facebook or Twitter, you name it, but there's something about the expressions on your face that you can't necessarily fool me with. You're looking at someone who's been I started my career as a judicial officer. I was the university's judicial officer my first 12 years here. And arguably, a student, well now and especially, what's the connection you can link, face to face, you can be on your screen, I can be on mine, and guess what? I can go over the code of student conduct with you, and you could be sitting in your room. Well, I don't think that that's necessarily effective. The idea that they have to come up and go to a certain place and meet with a certain individual and see him or her and have follow-up questions and all those things, I think that's so sacred to the human experience is the face-to-face connection. When we lose sight of that, I think we're really going to find ourselves into some real issues moving forward. And I think the jury may still be out as to how much this technology is really helping us, and I understand its need and its necessity, but it should not be at the expense, I would think, of face-to-face communications that I think are so vital for not only us as administrators and faculty and students, but as they leave this institution, they're going to have to engage with people, and I think we build on a lot of that here at the university, so I hope we don't ever lose sight of that.
I'd like to ask another question. What strategies do you use to manage different types of relationships? Examples would be direct reports, peers, and the people you serve. Is there a difference in the way you have that relationship? Up, down, sideways?
The strategies, I guess, that I utilize is for good or bad, I think I have got to be comfortable with who I am and not try to be Terry Allen, Mary Vosovich, whomever. I think there's a uniqueness out there with regards to the experiences that I've had over my professional career, how the places that I come from, the experiences that I have that have brought me to this point. And I have to, first of all, be comfortable with that as I take that into any relationship. And most of my relationships have been engaged with students, and obviously there's a different strategy there as I deal with students, and now that I'm in this part of my career, it's less with students and I have more distance from them. But this idea of knowing who you are, I think Mary talked about earlier, our value systems, I take all of that with me. One of the key relationships that I think about is the spiritual faith that I have. I take that, it's embedded in who I am. And hopefully that comes out in my communications with whomever it might be. I have a lot of engagement, obviously, with parents, with students in particular, and it's so important that the individual that you hear this morning and you see, that I'm hopefully that same individual, irregardless of the circumstance I find myself in. I find myself in some very, very interesting situations. Some of what I have to do is I'm on the road when something traumatic happens to one of our students, whether they pass away. Obviously, we have students who pass away in the course of an academic year. One of my responsibilities, to the extent it's possible, I try to travel to go to a visitation or indeed the funeral. It's very, the me that you see here now is a little bit different than that person who goes and represents the institution at that particular setting, because it requires, as you know, a different type of a persona, if you will. But for the most part, my mom and dad who raised their little son, well, not so little anymore, but I'll stay seated so you folks won't pick up on that one. But anyway, it's some of those things that they've instilled in me have served me the best, and it's so important that I be as much Victor Hazard as I can be and not try to be somebody else.
Well, for me, I think dealing with a broad spectrum in facilities, there's 800 staff members in facilities, and they all have their own needs, they all have their own goals, they all have their own vision. So what I have to do is try to, by working with those folks and talking with them, try to figure out what that is. And then that helps me to be able to communicate what the goals and needs are of the institution as well. But you've got to, as much as you can, know the people that you're working with. I don't know all the folks in facilities yet. I see a couple out here, but I don't know them all, and that's a big challenge. So, I mean, how many of you know the custodian's name in your building? Yay! And how many of you have talked to them? That's really good, because, and Mike, you've heard me say this before, those are the folks we're giving the keys to the palace to. And when you do when they don't do their jobs, nobody wants to be here really. So I've got to try to put myself in their shoes and understand what their goals and needs are. And that's a challenge every day, but it's an important one, and it's something that I am always reminding myself of. So it's just really, again, trying to understand who those folks are and developing those relationships with them.
Yeah, I agree, and you talked about, you asked about different kinds of relationships. I think as I've had different roles in the university, I've had to recalibrate each time to figure out how to relate to different people. So to give you an example, when I became department chair, which I don't know how many of you know this, but that's a terrible job. It's really stressful. It is. I mean, it has its joys, but it is a lot of stress. And one of the stresses came from the fact that people changed in their reactions to me, in their relationship. And I found, oh, okay, now I have to be different with you. And it was a little dance, and it took a while to find the level and to connect in a new way with folks that I had known in some cases for decades, to get to the point where we could work very productively together and kind of maximize each other's potential. But yeah, it was a challenge.
Well, I will just say it something very briefly here. I'm a firm believer, and the thing that impresses me is to listen to, once again, my colleagues and learn from them. But I'm a firm believer that you lead by example. You lead by example. If you expect others to work very hard and to do those tasks that are not always pleasant, to volunteer for various assignments and to spend early mornings and late nights for the betterment of the department or the institution as a whole, then you better be willing to do that yourself. You lead by example. You treat each and every one the same. I'm so impressed with when everyone raised their hand having to do with the maintenance staff that's in their building, because you never know when you may call on that individual, or it may be the director of the unit for support, and you will need that help. And once again, you go back to the foundation that you've built to be in a position where you're comfortable to be able to do that. So that's what I have to say.
My response was going to be a combination of Mr. Allen's and Dean Hazard. So kind of stole my thunder, but
Me too.
just one thing that I think is crucial in relationships, whether it's the people that are above you, people below you, people that are equal, is just service to them. I think that selflessly serving those around you is crucial in them gaining trust in you and your relationship growing, flourishing, and in turn, your working relationship growing and leading to better outcomes. So definitely lead by example, like you said, but then also serving the people around you, I think, is crucial in building those relationships.
Any follow-ups?
You talk a little bit about how your relationships change as you move through the different ranks, and then you all change roles. How did your relationship change with people in particular? And then how have you described sort of power? You know, at some point you have to move from being a direct leader of a unit to being leader of an area of things. How did you change your approach and your leadership to empower new leadership underneath you, beside of you?
That's really hard. You know, I come out of an environment of we do things. That's what we do in facilities. We do things. We build things, we fix things, we clean things, we keep the lights on. And so that's kind of in my DNA. And maybe also being female, that might be a little bit part of it also. We always want to fix things and make everything nice and, you know, and quite frankly, you know, some folks don't necessarily want that. Sometimes they want to be heard, but they don't want you to do anything about it. They just want to be listened to, you know. So in my journey, my professional journey, I really had to learn that, to say, you know, I mean, my colleague I knew was a rock star. You know, I was in a previous position where he and I were competing for the same position. And I was what I believed at that time to be the successful candidate, of course, and then I thought, oh my God, what did I get myself into? You know, but I had to rely on him in a completely different way than I ever have. And so, again, you know, it's part of nurturing those relationships, though. We had to do a little dance for a while, you know, to try to figure out what the new dynamic was. But it is that trust issue also that you have to lean on, I think, and know that if you can give someone the tools, you also got to give them not just the responsibility to do it, but the authority to do it. And that's a little bit of letting go, and sometimes it hurts. But I think that's essentially what you have to do. I see a lot of that in some of our positions and throughout my career in maintenance where, you know, a groundskeeper has now become a grounds supervisor. That is a tough transition for them. And so, again, we've got to give them the tools for that person to make that transition. And they need to understand the beauty of good communications. And how are they going to communicate now with a person that was a former peer that now they have some leadership over them. It's tough. It's not easy. Be true to yourself and remember who you are, and I think that helps you get through a lot of that.
Anyone else want to comment? We had a lot of other hands.
Why don't we just take another question?
Okay. Yes, right behind.
Are any of you familiar with this theory of servant
up somebody.
I haven't, and I'll take a stab at it. I think of servant, I'm not sure what the technicalities of servant leadership entails. But to me, it kind of it reminds me of going to the heart of who I am and what the idea of being true to yourself. A servant obviously is always or should be about others. And so should it be others first and then me, and that I hold back maybe some of my directions I might want to go with a particular matter in dealing with people? I'm going back to the former question a little bit of, as you move up through the ranks, so to speak, there's a lesser role I think that we have to play as supervisors. I'm thinking of when I first came to campus, I had some assistant deans and I had student conduct, as I'd mentioned to you earlier. But I also, I find myself now having, instead of having, I think I had about 4 or 5 assistant deans that reported to me. Now I have hundreds of people that report to me. And so the idea of letting go of some of the ways that I do things so that they can indeed take their expertise, they can take their educations in the directions that they might want to go, that might be in some cases not the way I would do it, but this idea of letting them sprout their wings and move forward. Servant leadership, and again, I may be way off base with the technicalities of it, but I think clearly it's the idea of focusing on others and putting yourself, not dismissing your experience or background, but indeed allowing them to enhance in their careers and do the things that I think that they're being trained to do, hopefully with your aid and your support.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I like to move the discussion from abstract to something very concrete.
Okay.
I worked in the industry, in the industrial research lab, before I came to UK as a professor. Staff member and me, we call each other first name basis. But my understanding is that that's not commonly practiced at university. I'm just curious, how good is our relationship between staff members and faculty?
Okay.
I think you choose how you're addressing someone based on the environment that you're in.
Yeah.
I will always refer to the president as the president. And I, and he'll write me a note and he'll sign it with his first name. And I write back, thank you, President Capilouto, but it's the environment, particular environment that you're in, and I think it's also the person that you're addressing. Sometimes, the provost in a formal meeting, I'm addressing him as Provost Tracy. When I'm with him in another environment, I'm addressing him as Tim. So I think you have to really,
So I guess my point is that in the business world, the ladder has been, it's been much more flat organization. People call each other first name basis, and people's, the cubicle size is the same, whether you're a CEO or
yeah.
staff.
Yeah.
Here, I think we have much more hierarchical structure, whether that's good for the environment or not, I think it's less of a discussion.
I was just reading something not long ago about how the corporate world is becoming much more relaxed in that environment. And so maybe we have something to learn from that. I don't know, but I was taught to address someone, with, that's just part of my DNA, I guess. And so sometimes when I'm in that environment, it's a little bit uncomfortable for me to not address them the way I was raised and trained to address someone. So,
I do think that obviously institutions are set up that way. You have presidents, vice presidents, assistant presidents, associate presidents, senior, whatever. You go on down the line, our systems are set up that way. But the idea, as I find myself in this new role, I find they're all my colleagues, and I choose to look at it as my colleagues, those individuals who I cannot work or get along without, who have expertise that I don't have. And so the idea, that I do not get offended if someone calls me Victor. My staff, a lot of my staff right now is struggling because students and my staff know me as Dean Hazard. Well, now that I'm an interim vice president, and I don't have a doctorate, I don't have a terminal degree, by the way, so it's kind of like they can't call me Dr. Hazard, and I can't call you Dean Hazard, so what do I call you? Mr. Hazard does just fine sometimes. You know, so, and then I go to Mary's point, depending on the settings that we're in, it may entail a different of how we address someone. It doesn't change the nature of that person, but indeed out of respect. But institutions, I would agree, are set up, in my mind, to be hierarchical right now. Whether or not, I think that we might be drifting away from that, but you've got, you know, professor, assistant professor, associate professor, you know, instructor, we're set up to have that kind of rank right now. And it's been, I think, somewhat traditional, obviously, for higher education. And it hasn't changed a lot, but indeed, time will tell if it does indeed ebb the other way.
I think as you look at the institution as a whole, and again, we're a very large institution, I think you do find various management structures are in place. There are those that are more flat structures as opposed to the pyramid type of organizational structure, but it may very well work in the situations where you tend to find it. Quite frankly, I've been taught, and I firmly believe, that you bestow upon the individual the respect that the individual has earned. And so I totally agree with Victor and Mary that if you're in a situation in which there are a formal gathering or something of this nature, then it's very appropriate to refer to the individual in terms of what that appropriate title may be. That's where I talked about earlier informal association as well. If you come to know the individual on other means, and there may be different situations in which you feel very comfortable with that, both parties do. But always remember that you're in the workplace. Always remember that. You are in the workplace and you should act accordingly.
Oh,
I understand what you're saying, and maybe I'm an outlier, but I tend to respect people for who they are and how they behave, but not necessarily because they fit in a certain
I would agree.
Well,
Yeah,
sure.
I think that's normal. I mean, but, you know, for me, I always take into consideration the environment that I'm in. But just so you know, if we cross paths in the weeks ahead, I'm Mary. All right. And I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
Yeah, and I agree with you too, and I do. And again, my thinking is that given the situation that you're in, I think they differ from day to day, sometimes from minute to minute. But I think you conduct and you address individuals according to those particular situations. So I think we're saying the same thing. Yes.
I would add that when someone says, when I'm in my doctorate program, my professor said, I want you to call me by my first name. Of course, that was really difficult for lots of us to do as, like, I want you to feel like you're a part, and I want, have a relationship, it's about relationships, that I want you to see me as a person too. And although, yes, she had this long, tenured, reasons why she was tenured, but she wanted to reach students on a different level as a result. So I think that there's a way of, if you are a supervisor, you can say, hey, please call me Jane or whatever the name is, but it can also help that relationship to be empowered as well. So it's a personal
But I think you bring up a good point. The mode of address is basically dependent upon the person giving you permission to go to a more informal. This is how I understand the culture. So the default is the more formal, respectful mode of address. And then if they say, hey, call me Sam, call them Sam, take them for their word. But if they don't say, hey, Sam, So I think that's just how I understand the culture of Kentucky. And I think that's fine. That's quite clear in a way. So.
yes, sir.
I wanted to get Austin back into the conversation, if that's all right. So I work in the recruitment office at the Gatton College of Business. So my relationship with students is pivotal. It's every day. I was just curious what your opinion would be, since you have the student perspective. How would you
definitely depends on the student. So the students that are involved in the classroom, do well, speak to the professors, I would say that they would all rank it as high as you could. However, students that outside of the classroom may not have friends that they can talk to about things, students that get in a tendency of, especially fall freshman year, going home every weekend, those are the kind of students that I would say would rank that really low and say that that's something that the university has not provided them. And I think that that is because it's a two-way street. I think that if students reach out to faculty, staff, anyone within the university, they will be received and approached and helped. And then, but also, the student has to do that, but then also on the other side. And I would say that in particular, GAD, I know that we reach out to every student via email, via our advisors, everything. However, there's never really that much one-on-one connection. And obviously you have your advising appointments, but outside of those, unless you really seek it, you'll never be granted that. And I mean, that's to be expected when you have a college with thousands of students and a ratio that is not that high between staff, faculty, and students. However, I think that if a student wanted a relationship with staff, faculty, I think that we are at a place where we're a place at UK where that is great. However, students that do not seek it, that's where the retention and getting them back is difficult because they have not made those connections and don't have the, I guess, roots in the university, and that takes away from their desire to come back.
You know, I'd like to say, I think that every one of us, on some level, are about recruiting and retention here at the university. Let me just give you a little bit of an example. Some of you weren't here in February when there were like 20 inches of that white stuff out there. I came from New Mexico, so 20 inches of that white stuff out there, and the campus was closed, and it really was a ghost town around here, except for the maintenance folks and those folks that had to be here for all the various reasons that they needed to be here. But there was parents and a young student, potential student, that didn't get the word that the university was closed. They were traveling, they came to the University of Kentucky, and guess what? Nobody was here. Nobody. And one of our building operators came across them and talked to them and took them up to the top of Patterson Office Tower and showed them the university. You know, and President Capilouto just recently shared a letter with some of us from a parent, that father, that said he was overwhelmed by the welcoming of the university for his child, and that has continued since they've been here. And so I thought, you know, that speaks volumes about really what all of our roles are here. I mean, we really are about student success and how we embrace that first. That's absolutely what we do. I tell that to all the folks in facilities, you know. You are supporting the ability for the university to do their work. And so I think that's really important, Austin, when you're talking about this whole recruiting and retention and the roles that we can play. But I was really proud of that person.
Did you have a question? Okay, we'll go on. What is the number one piece of relationship advice you would offer to our participants that has served you well in your career in building relationships? Number one piece of advice.
Me to give advice, boy, that's scary. I would say this as it relates to relationships, and this is very, very important to me. I think relationships are typically built on that which we are least willing to give. And by that I mean it's time. The way you show you're interested in me and I'm interested in you is I'm willing to give you a piece of my time. And it has to be somewhat ongoing if a relationship is to be established. We are in a quick fix society. Technology takes us quickly wherever we want around the world. But this idea of my willingness to sit down with you and spend some time, I'd be willing to bet you, those of you who think you know me well, if you sat down with me, you would find that there's some things we have in common, and you would find some things that you would not have thought of. Good old Dean Hazard. But that takes some time. I will share this with you kind of briefly. I was talking with someone not too long ago, and we were talking about diversity and some of those things, and obviously it came clear to me that this individual thought I was African American. To look at me, I look African American by most assumptions, but I'm not, and I'm predominantly Native American on both my mom and dad's side. Now, most people don't know that about me. The only way you find out that about me is to sit down, and I've shared that with a number of people who've taken some of their time to find out more about Victor Hazard. My experience is not unlike African Americans or others on campus, and minorities, but indeed, that notion of who I am is more than what you see. And for me to know more about you and your experience, and for you to get to know more about me and my experience, is going to require some of your time. But we don't have much of that anymore. And so as we look at our students and serving our students and student success and retention, I'd be willing to bet you, to the extent we spend more time with those individuals or on those individuals, with their class schedules, with their advisors, or whatever it might, with their out-of-class experience, that we invest some of ourselves in those individuals, I think you will find that we will be served better. They will be served better by our willingness to give them some of our time. We shouldn't be that busy.
Well, I guess for me, it would be, it's okay to care. And a lot of people say, oh, well, you care too much. I don't think that's possible. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're a pushover. You know, it just means that you care. And it's how you use that in your role that will bolster your relationships, I think. And it doesn't mean you're going to let anybody take advantage of you. You still have to make tough decisions in your everyday jobs. But that doesn't mean that you don't care. And so it bothers me when people say you care too much. I don't think I can ever care too much. I don't think that cup will ever be full enough. But it's how you use that, I think. And it's just, if you, let me just give, it's another facilities saying of it's just another tool in our tool belt, you know, and it's an important one, I think.
When I think about the people who I've most admired as leaders or mentors or just people, it's mostly because they've been kind. And so that's something that I try and remember when you're tempted to judge or get angry or, you know, suddenly have some kind of resolution that doesn't fully try and understand the other person's life. That's when I remember trying to be kind, because who knows what's happening in that person's world? Who knows exactly how complicated their life is at that time? So I think being kind is a really, it sounds kind of wimpy, but I think actually it's a very hard thing to consistently be. But I think it's very, very important. And it doesn't mean that one isn't able to make tough decisions. It doesn't mean that at some times the things that you find yourself deciding are not happy for someone else. But I think being kind to other people is crucial. And it was actually Kurt Vonnegut who gave that advice to babies. He was asked what he would say to on the occasion of some friend's baby's birth, and he said, "For God's sake, baby, be kind." So
I think you listen. That's a word that hasn't come up this morning, but I think you learn to listen. You listen to what people have to say, and you embrace the individuals that are making the comments, understanding that if their perspectives, if their values differ from yours, that's okay. That's quite all right. That's when the learning occurs. I think you treat each and every one with mutual respect and human dignity, that you welcome the contribution of every individual to this institution. And I think you be consistent with that. I think that what makes us great is that we bring a lot of perspectives to each and every issue that occurs on our campus. We bring those perspectives, and from that, we have, and you engage in meaningful dialogue that's respectful of the others. And from there, you're able then to ultimately come out with the best conclusions. But I think, again, listen to what the individuals have to say, respect what they have to say, respect diverse opinions, and engage conversation. Step out of your zone where you're comfortable, and find ways in which you can expand your own horizon as well as the contributions of others. So I think that's primarily my thinking on it.
Well, I guess I'm on the same wavelength with Mr. Allen and Mr. Hazard today, because I was going to say time, and then Dean Hazard, well, I guess I can't call him Dean Hazard right now, but
What do we call you, Victor?
Just don't call me late to dinner. That's all I'm going to say.
said time, so I was like, okay, I was thinking, okay, I'll say listen, and then Mr. Allen takes that. So struggling down here on the end to say something for the first time, but definitely I think it's crucial to just have a general interest in relationships, and I think that is shown through your interactions with them, from if they have an issue, talking to them in person about it. A lot of times, especially students, people try to solve things via text message, and that's just not the way to go. But on top of that, just being there to listen is crucial in you analyzing and being able to give the proper advice, but also them seeing your genuine care for their issue. And so I think that a combination of time, listening, and presence, and showing genuine care in what they're saying is a necessity. And
Questions from the audience? Michael?
Okay, you're dealing with individuals, and you gave us good advice on trying to create a relationship. What if you have a relationship that's a bit on the negative? How do you handle trying to what advice would you give us to try to rebuild a relationship that might not be that toxic?
I've always tried to be frank, like just have a conversation with that person that sort of lays it out, that I don't think things are going well and something's not right, and see what they think. They usually agree and have some ideas about why, and I think that's when you can do the listening and conversing and try and figure it out. But I think you have to be frank and start an open conversation, if possible.
The nature of my work, obviously in my earlier years, was indeed I was embedded in negative conversations. Obviously, I was a university's judicial officer, and obviously the student didn't always see eye to eye with Dean Hazard. I don't understand that even to this day, why they wouldn't have. But this idea that we all have a story to tell, and they would be fond of telling me their story, but I always knew that there was another piece of information that they weren't telling me, whether it's through reports or eyewitnesses or others. And this idea that Sue talks about being frank, one thing about Victor, my middle name should be Frank, maybe. Victor Frank Hazard, I don't know, might think about changing it, but the idea is the truth is the truth, and what has happened, and you deal with that. That consistency, I think that's been talked about, we got to be fair and consistent in some of those things, but those negative conversations, but somebody has to be able to do that, and in my earlier years was obviously that was my job, to have frank conversations about some pretty profound things that would happen on campus. And someone who knew that what happens on campus, you're looking at them. I tell people one of these days I'm going to write a book when I learn how to write, and I'm going to change the names to protect the guilty, but, and so don't ever have to worry about that. But this idea of relationships invariably turn around to be positive experiences, but it also brings about some negative experiences. That's what life is all about, and how we deal with those, and that we know the worth of that individual, and we try to be consistent, whether it's in promoting policy and procedures. It's sacred to what we do, irregardless of what that individual may have done. And so I think that's very, very, very important, that we treat every individual with the utmost respect, as if the same way we would want to be treated.
I think, Mike, that's a very good question. Having spent a great deal of my time at the University of Kentucky investigating allegations of discriminatory behavior, and that ranges from one extreme to the other. What my colleagues are saying, I will repeat. I call them closed-door meetings. You go in and you close the door and you get straight to the point, is what you tend to do. And when you have reached that particular point, then you start to see where you go from there, how we're going to rebuild this. There may be opportunities that come along in which you can engage in common experiences that help to reestablish relationships if there is ill will following what you are here responsible for doing. Yet on the other hand, there may not. So, but I think that's where you start, and then you pretty much go from there with be very open-minded and a willingness to move beyond that if that's a possible thing to do.
Be willing to hear things you don't want to hear.
Yes.
Yes. We all have to have a thick skin sometimes, but sometimes those are the things that open the door then to being able to mend that difficult relationship also, is when somebody points something out to you that you had no idea. So you've got to work through those things.
Any other comments? I'll add two things, both from my grandmother, who came to live with us when I was 7 years old. My grandfather passed away. And one was, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in the same proportion. And so, as a child, I learned to be a good listener and to understand the different perspectives. And I think that has really been a help with building relationships. Her other phrase was, if you mess up, fess up. And so, she would forgive anything and everything as long as you were telling her the truth. So, as I raised my own daughter, I used those phrases. And even in the employment, it's okay. We're all human. We are not perfect, and we're going to make mistakes. And so I would say, give your employees the opportunity, empower them to fail, because you learn your best lessons from when you do make a mistake and when you fail. The lesson is, are you making that same mistake over and over again? So that would be my parting words of advice. Join me in giving the group